How does a felony case go from arrest to a negotiated guilty plea and final disposition in just 7 days? That's the questions new media is asking. Let's get into it. According to the House and County docket, Larry Dale Clark Jr. was arrested after multiple allegations surfaced, including burglary, aggravated assault, stalking involving family violence, and harassing phone calls. Yet just days later, the only conviction reflected in Superior Court is first-degree burglary, with a negotiated plea resulting in 10 years of probation. And if you've watched the criminal justice system move, then you know felony cases usually take months, sometimes years. But this one moved from arrest to conviction in just 1 week. All right, let's walk through the timeline. On May 24th, the docket reflects that burglary charges being filed. By May 27th, multiple warrant applications had been submitted, warrants were issued, warrants were served, and multiple magistrate cases had already been opened. Bond was initially set at $0 with no bond until a conditional bond was signed. Then the very next day, on May 28th, those magistrate cases were transferred and then closed. And just 2 days later, on June 3rd, everything changes. The state doesn't present a grand jury indictment that reflects on the docket. Instead, prosecutors file what's called a bill of accusation. And that document charges Larry Dale Clark Jr. with 1 count of first-degree burglary. Now, according to the accusation, the allegations is that on May 24th, 2026, he entered the residence of an alleged victim with the intent to commit the felony offense of distributing a counterfeit substance. That's the allegation contained in the charging document. What's striking is that this accusation now contains only the single burglary count. The other charges that appear at the time of arrest, aggravated assault, stalking family violence, and multiple harassing phone calls are no longer part of the accusation filed in Superior Court. Then less than 24 hours later, on June 4th, the entire case is essentially over. According to the docket, a plea and bond hearing is held. Larry Clark enters a negotiated plea to first-degree burglary. He's adjudicated guilty. A felony sentence with probation is entered. Special conditions are filed. A waiver of rights is filed. Court costs and crime lab fees are assessed, and the case is closed. All of this happening on the same day. Another detail that caught my attention is who the defendant is. Publicly available photos show Larry Clark wearing a Macon Bibb Corners office assistant uniform. And he's also known locally as the driver of the Atlanta Falcons themed tow truck. Those are publicly visible facts. Whether either had an influence on how quickly this case moved is not something these court dockets answer. But it is a question people are going to ask when they look at this timeline. There are other questions raised by the documents. The docket I reviewed reflects a bill of accusation, but I don't see an indictment entry or an arraignment entry reflected on the docket before the negotiated plea. If there are additional filings that explain that process, I'd like to see them. And that's the reason why we filed an open records request for the complete file. Another question involves the special conditions, right? Because based on the arrest record, there were originally allegations involving aggravated assault, stalking family violence, and harassing phone calls involving the alleged victim. If those charges did not move forward in Superior Court and the negotiated plea was only to burglary, why do special conditions reportedly require Larry Clark to have no contact with the alleged victim? Is that condition tied to the facts underlying the burglary case? Is it based on conduct alleged in the charges that did not proceed? The docket alone doesn't answer those questions. And here's the bigger picture. Every week across Georgia, people sit in county jails for months, sometimes years, waiting for their felony case to move. Continuances, delays, reset after reset. Yet this case moved from arrest to final disposition in approximately 7 days. That tells me one thing. The system has the ability to move quickly when it does. The question isn't whether can it move fast. The question is what circumstances led to move that fast in some cases and not others. Then there's another name that caught my attention. Judge Edward D. Lukemeyer publicly announced earlier this year that he was retiring from the Superior Court bench effective April 1st. Now, his name also appeared in another case new media has reported on, the Dexter Lee Williams matter. Judge Lukemeyer appeared for 1 day on Dexter Williams' case. A new indictment number was formally introduced, a new court reporter was formally introduced, and the next day they went back to the original indictment. I'm not saying these situations are the same, but I am saying his name appears in both matters. And that makes me want to understand the procedural history in each case. Now, at New Media, we're not arguing innocence nor guilt. We're following the paperwork. We're following the timeline. We're following the court records. And if there are additional documents that explain every step of this process, I'll report those too. That's why we filed an open records request, because transparency shouldn't depend on who's asking the question. It should simply be the standard. And if you've ever seen another felony case go from arrest to negotiated plea and final disposition in roughly 7 days, send it to me. I want to see it. And if there's an explanation for everything in this file, I'll report that too. But until then, these are the documents. This is the timeline. And these are the questions that they raise. This is Lamar King Sr., investigative analyst, New Media, where the truth will never be silenced. Be great today. Peace.